Welcome to the instructional video on song number 3, song/dance. As a quick review, song 1 was where humanity was in its primordial state, before language, before thoughts, and humanity is umbilically connected to Mother Earth. And then song 2 is that humanity, now in this next stage of growth, is still synchronized to the heartbeat of Mother Earth, but is starting to nucleate its identity. And now song 3, which is what this is that humanity's identity has bloomed and its individuality has formed. But maybe in the process it has separated us from the rest of the living world. Okay, so before I talk about song 3, I'll talk about the transition from song 2 into song 3. So watch this video clip of it first and then I'll describe it. Okay, so in that dance, I had that yucca rope that I created. In the first song, it represented my umbilical cord. In the second song, it turned into a tail. And then in this song, I rupture it, and it's like, I am the human versus nature, okay? And I should also say that, there is great beauty in this part of the journey, because it represents the exploration of something vastly new, a vast new territory that perhaps, life and Mother Earth and nature haven't explored before. And so humanity is creating a relationship with the earth and nature that perhaps has never existed before. And so it's exciting and it's interesting and it's beautiful. But at the same time, there is a jarring sadness in this too, because language and thought and the perception of reality, they all become louder and louder and louder, and they separate us from the living world and from the present moment. So musically, the way that I represent this is, first we start off with the sound of rain and birds that I've sampled from my backyard. And this was actually in the second song too. And then, this is all one clip actually, because I can never record any nature sounds near my house without having these cars just zooming back and forth in the recording. It's actually quite maddening because I live right next to a busy street. But then again, it's thematically relevant. So we start off with nature sounds, and then crescendoing, you hear these cars that become louder and louder and louder and swamp away, so you can't hear the birds even though they're there. Okay, then you hear all of this noise coming. And I represent language and consciousness and the perception of reality as being noise. And I don't mean noise in the vernacular definition. I mean noise more from the mathematical definition, and the idea that for example, white noise is it's many different frequencies all superimposed together. And all of these frequencies have more or less the same intensity. So you can't hear one frequency more than the other. And sometimes what people do is they play white noise so that they can disconnect from the rest of the world, because the auditory information coming from the rest of the world gets absorbed in this wall of white noise. And so in that same way, language and consciousness floods our brain with so much sensory processing that it disconnects us from the present moment. So the way I represent noise, the different components in it, the first is there's a sample of a deep vibrating noise from an exhaust fan at Brandeis. And I also sort of sample these high-pitched noise from a leaf blower near my house. And then there's Brownian motion noise generator that I got from Audacity. There's also, I've sampled howling wind in Mumbai in a skyscraper apartment-like complex where my grandmother, aunt, and cousins live. And then I also sampled music from my first song and the thunder from the second song. Okay, so this is going to be where I describe the music behind song 3, which is about the human identity and how it becomes individual and how it creates sort of its individuality. Now the music to represent the birth of thought, language, consciousness, and the perception of reality. All of that's being represented by my voice and words, which you'll hear throughout the song. There's also a drum beat, and that drum beat goes from very slow, and then it begins to accelerate and go faster and faster, and becomes more and more frantic to represent the frantic nature of humanity to produce and consume at faster and faster rates. There was this like idea that the washer and dryer would save hours of our time that we would waste trying to wash our clothes, and the microwave would save hours of our time that we would waste trying to cook, and the cell phone would save hours of our time that we'd waste when we'd hop on our horses and go to the neighbor. And then that would free up time for us to do what humans do, which is create and explore and investigate. But that's not really what happened, because everyone's wicked busy, because everyone's got things to do, because everyone needs to produce and consume at faster and faster rates. And the question is, where are we going so fast? Where are we going? Answer? Nobody knows. That's humanity. Okay, so there are also tempo changes in this, because I wanted to explore tempo changes. So it goes from slow to fast, slow to fast. And the slow parts represent the subconscious. And the fast parts, all the things to-do list and all the things we have to do, represents the consciousness. The theme of 3 is there. So everything repeats in 3s, because my hair cycle is in sets of like every 3 years. And I'll talk more about that in my instructional video next. The heart and soul of the song is the chickadee call. And the chickadee is a beautiful bird. And it's a state bird of Massachusetts, which is where I'm from. And I also have a feeder in my backyard, so they come. And I've had this idea for at least like 7-8 years to create a dance around the chickadee's cadence. Now, the chickadee's call is just that. It's chickadee, chickadee-dee-dee, chickadee-dee-dee-dee. And what's really interesting is that call has a meaning to it. It actually has language, vocabulary, and to a certain extent the chickadees have a grammar. The more D's that are at the end of that call conveys that come over here, other chickadees, this is important. So the more D's you have, the more important it is. And that might be because there might be a really new awesome food source, so you're trying to get all of your buddies to come. Or it may be because an enemy, a predator's coming, and you're trying to corral together. And it's interesting because that also sort of represents what humanity is doing. The human identity, we're hyper-clustering, we're getting super dense. And ironically, it doesn't necessarily remedy or reduce the inherent loneliness that a lot of us feel. And on the back is a piano piece. And the piano piece contains chords from the first song. In the first song, it was stretched out to give the primordial feel to it. When the song becomes really, really frantic, the chord structure changes. And that's the chord structure from my nasty pose that I do. Okay, this is the dance instructional video for the chickadee song. And all you really need to know is that everything is based off of the cadence of the chickadee. And basically the one rule is that every time you hear D, you just move your feet. So let me give you an example. Chickadee, chickadee, chickadee. Now what I can also do is add more D's to it, just like the bird does. So for example, chickadee dee, chickadee dee. And usually what I do is for the single chickadee, I do both legs. And for multiple D's, I just do different, legs. And that's just something I do. You're welcome to do it too. Now, the next thing is that everything is in cycles of 3, because my hair cycles are every 3 years I shave everything off. And there's a super cycle of 6 actually, because the first 3 years I shave everything except the mullet, and then the next 3 years I shave everything including the mullet. So within the song there's also extra patterns at 6, but I'm not really going to describe that. It will probably get too confusing. So just focus, the magic number is 3. And what happens is that you have 3 iterations of everything. So for example, the song starts off with just single chickadees, and you do that 3 times. Chickadee, chickadee, chickadee. And then you transition to 2 Ds, and you do that 3 times. Chickadee, dee, chickadee, dee, chickadee, dee. And then you transition to 3 Ds, And you do it 3 times, that 3 iteration. Chicka D D D, chicka D D D, chicka D D D. And then the tempo increases, and towards the end of the song, where the tempo is the fastest, I actually throw in 4 Ds. So it's chicka D D D D, chicka D D D D, chicka D D D D.